can fundraisers adjust and stay resilient during this era of the pandemic? Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the Fundraising School, and I'm joined today by Julie Teer, who's the Chief Development Officer for Boys and Girls Clubs of America. And we're so fortunate each time Julie joins us. She's been with us previously at our Leadership Roundtable, and now is with us on this podcast to tell the remarkable story of what Boys and Girls Clubs are doing to adjust their fundraising efforts during the COVID crisis. And as a bit of background, due to some new annual fund strategies, Boys and Girls Clubs of America moved up into the top 10 of the Philanthropy 400. And to put that into context, 4 of those top 10 are actually private wealth managers of donor-advised funds. There are actually only 6 kind of pure nonprofits on that list, and one of them is Boys and Girls Clubs of America, thanks to Julie's leadership. So, Julie, you had remarkable success increasing your annual fund, and then the pandemic hits. How have your strategies adjusted accordingly?
Sure. Well, Bill, thank you for your partnership, and thank you for having me on today. You know, I always say fundraising and philanthropy is truly a team sport, and so the success that our Boys and Girls Clubs have had around the country is it's really a team effort, and that's no different as we really work to raise critical funds for our mission during this pandemic. And you know, at the outset of COVID-19, what we did is we really, took a moment to pause and look inward and remind ourselves why Boys and Girls Clubs exist to begin with, and the essential role that our clubs play in each and every community. And to really make sure that as we went out to engage our board members, our key donors and stakeholders, as well as prospects, because that was really important, that we didn't stop communicating with our donors and prospects, but that we really could bring to life the essential role our clubs were playing in every community, whether it was hundreds of our clubs that had remained open at the request of state and local governments to provide childcare services for essential workers, to thousands of our clubs continuing to be that place that a child and their family can rely on for a healthy meal or snack. So many of our clubs, were set up as grab-and-go sites or delivered food to families that they served, as well as thousands of our clubs now, to this day, running some type of virtual programming to stay connected to our young people, to help address the learning loss that unfortunately, so many youth, particularly in lower income households and communities, are subjected to during the summer. And so really helping our young people stay on track academically. So really just honing why clubs exist to begin with, and what our mission is all about in a very authentic way, and being able to really bring that to life for donors and stakeholders. And I think in many ways, even for donors that have been with us for a while, the COVID-19 pandemic, I think in many cases, really helped to deepen their understanding of the essentialness of Boys and Girls Clubs. You always think about what would it be like without a Boys and Girls Club? And I think for many, they could start to paint that picture, and it really helped to underscore that our clubs are mission critical in every community.
Julie, it sounds like, on one hand, the case for Boys and Girls Clubs of America that was true on February 29th, before all this really started, is still true today. But how also have you adjusted your communication to include what has happened since March 1st, and helping donors understand how the clubs at the local level have adapted to the crisis? How has that become part of your case for support?
Absolutely. So we have done a number of things, whether it's written communications on a weekly basis to board members and trustees, to actually having in March and pretty much through April and May, weekly board meetings of our governing board, and then our local clubs the same, to really communicate how COVID was impacting our clubs and our national organization, and how we were pivoting to respond to those needs. We also leverage technology, I think, like everybody is doing today, to conduct webinars for our corporate partners and really engage some of our local club leaders in many different communities to come on and really bring to light the role that they were playing in so many of our communities as we've gone along. And for even our prospects, I think that even with our fundraising team, right, a lot of people haven't had to fundraise in a pandemic before. And so being comfortable with communicating with donors and that, underscoring that they want to hear from you. And even if it's not making that call tomorrow to make an ask, the importance of staying connected to them to help ensure that they understand the impact and what we were doing and how our young people were still, being supported by our clubs during this time has also helped to ensure that when people or companies were ready to start thinking about making a gift or giving again or re-looking at their philanthropic strategies, that we were top of mind and are top of mind. And we continue with that strategy today.
So one step has been more frequent communication with your board members. How have you adjusted in the way you communicate with your donors? Your local clubs fundraise locally, but you're at the national office and you are fundraising nationally. You and your team there at the headquarters are reaching out to people across the United States. How has your donor relation strategy changed in response to the pandemic?
Sure. So at the local level, and as you know, Bill, we have a team at the national organization that leads a tremendous effort that supports our local clubs and helps our local clubs build stronger fundraising capacity. So really helping our local clubs do the same thing, hone their case for support, making sure that they're having regular and relevant communications with their donors and their stakeholders. Matching gifts. We've seen some of matching gifts really take hold. So if that was a board member or that was a donor of a local club making a gift and being able to then set that as a match to inspire others has worked really, really well. Pivoting to, so many in the spring and the summer, it's event season, fundraising event season at the local level and nationally, which I'll talk about. And so really working with our clubs to pivot to virtual events and being able to, I think in many ways, many fundraisers would love to be able to stop some of their fundraising events and really focus on individual giving. And, I think the pandemic presented an opportunity for our clubs to start to hone more of the individual giving skills and to be able to really make the case for mission support by communicating the impact of COVID, and had tremendous success in retaining event donors for general mission support. And that's the same at the national level as we think about, we would be right now in the throes of our gala season, which is all around our Youth of the Year competition. So some of our best and brightest youth that compete in a year-round competition at every club level, goes to the state level, the region, and then the national. And so we're having to pivot to virtual events in the fall as well. We also at the national organization, literally within a week, established a COVID-19 relief fund. We pivoted our fundraising strategies at the national organization immediately to first and foremost raise as much money as we could to pass through to our local clubs who needed it most, and raised just under $20 million in about 4 weeks' time to pass through to our local organizations to support their efforts. And there too, we saw many clubs be able to leverage those grants that came from the National COVID-19 Relief Fund to inspire others in their community to support them as well.
Julie, last question I'd like to ask you as you give us this great practical advice that all fundraisers can apply I know initially the strategy has been to build on the recent momentum and double the annual fund by 2025. That's the big, hairy, audacious goal the BHAG that BGCA has in place. And in order to double the number of youth that you serve by the middle of this decade, have you had to adjust that goal, or are you still keeping that goal in the forefront despite the pandemic?
No, it's a great question, and actually something that we are in the midst of right now. We first tackled 2020 across not just fundraising, but every aspect of what we do at the national organization and working with our local clubs to replan 2020 and to pivot in many cases. Identify the things that we were going to stop doing, or we were going to pivot, or we were going to put the pedal down on. And so we are actually right now in the process with our planning commission, which is our national leadership, as well as about 30 club CEOs across the country, and another 30 local club board members, where pretty much for the next 6 months, we'll be tackling just that, looking at our 2025 strategy, and as best we can, given the uncertainty of the environment, looking at how that needs to change. I can tell you that, for the foreseeable future, virtual and how we virtually engage young people as clubs reopen, but with health guidelines only able to serve about a quarter of the kids in the facilities. And so there's going to be this in-person and virtual mix for the foreseeable future. And so really starting to reshape that, what that's going to look like. The new club for a new day is what we're calling it. But I think there's one thing that will remain constant, which is there's going to be more kids that need a Boys and Girls Club than ever before. And that's what our focus is to make sure that we have the ability to meet that need, which we know is going to be greater than it was pre-COVID.
So many practical takeaways in our conversation today with Julie Teer, who leads fundraising for Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Again, if your case was strong on February 29th, your case is still strong today, and that case can be adjusted and added to by describing what you're doing to adjust with your programming and with your fundraising due to the pandemic. Greater engagement with the board of directors, more information more often to our board and to our frontline fundraisers. Continued conversations, different methods, but continued conversations with our donors. And then updating the vehicles. Julie mentioned with their annual fund and with their special events, the way that adjustments are being made, and then taking a look at short and long-term strategies, all part of fundraising during the pandemic. And as we've said since day one of this, with the pandemic, the bad news is there is no textbook to follow. The great news is we get to write the next one. And an abundance-minded fundraiser will see that as an opportunity amidst the challenges and, yes, the difficulties and hardships of raising money amidst the COVID crisis. We're here for you for the Fundraising School. We want to be your career-long colleague. And during the pandemic, we put this under the umbrella of TFRS at your desk. We have these weekly free podcasts that are being tailored to fundraising during the COVID crisis. We have our Fridays with the Fundraising School, where once a month we get together online. We have to call them a webinar, but they're really not as much a presentation as they are a conversation where people are bringing their best practices, their stories of success, asking their questions, sharing their concerns all together in a fundraising community. And yes, we are still offering our courses primarily online, but hopefully later in the summer and early in the fall back in person in Indianapolis as local, state, and our university policies allow. And of course, you can apply for a crisis response scholarship that can reduce the cost of those courses by as much as 50%. TFRS at your desk, the Fundraising School, TFRS at your desk, all available online at philanthropy.iupui.edu/the Fundraising School. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are more up to date on this first day from the Fundraising School.